my focus has always been on solving problems for people. And Watermist has been a really important way of dealing with this. So this is very much aligned to one of the reports which came out post Grenfell by Dame Judith Packett even. And she raised the point that prescriptive regulation and guidance is not always helpful when designing complex buildings, and technology and practices are continuing to evolve. She said that an outcome-based framework requires people to be competent and not follow guidance blindly, but think for themselves to maintain and deliver safe buildings throughout their life cycle. And this is something that we at Plumis have really been trying to think about. How can we evolve the solutions to keep up to date with the way in which they are changing all the time? So the very first thing that we do when we think about designing a building, designing protection for a building, is thinking about the factors involved. In the UK here, elective fire safety upgrades fall under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. So codes and testing is obviously a key part of making sure that we can have solutions that are fit for purpose. This order puts responsibilities on the individuals to carry out a risk assessment when they're introducing new things, and asks them to ensure that due diligence is performed before they commission any device. So what does that mean? Well, that means that whenever a buyer, a customer, somebody protecting a building is considering improving their fire safety, they must consider a number of things. The first part is to define and understand the housing type and its characteristics. Are we looking for a solution for a flat? Are we looking for a solution for an individual building? What are the things that we have to consider? The water supply, is a phased installation approach preferable? Is there a high risk group that we would like to target? All of these things come into play. And then secondly, and most importantly, what are the occupants who are living there, and how does this affect the fire safety strategy? So how easily can we get the individuals to buy in? Can they self-evacuate? Factors like tenability, how can we assess that the solutions that we are providing are appropriate? Now, I'd like to also talk a little bit about how fires have changed, focusing particularly on the UK. Now, since 1990s, we've had the introduction of MMC, modern methods of construction, and this has had some implication on the types of fires that we see in our buildings. Hydrogen cyanide, for example, is 35% more dangerous than carbon monoxide. And that is a result of, it's very well documented, of some of the changes in materials that we use. We also see housing densification. The English Housing Survey quoted that overcrowding is one of the significant fire risks that they are concerned about. And in the vast majority of the developing world, we're also seeing aging populations where those who are over the ages of 65 are disproportionately likely to be affected negatively within a fire. So this is something that we need to think about. Now, on the bottom of the slide, I'd also like to point to some of the factors regarding how fires start and how they are changing in recent years. We have seen a decrease in smoking-related fires and chip pan fires, particularly here in the UK, which has gone down from 20% to around 6%. And more recently, we are seeing an increased number in both electrical fires and white goods fires. So when we've been thinking about solutions, we're thinking about how can we provide the most appropriate thing. And for us, this has mean not just focusing on designing for the standards, although they provide a important benchmark that indeed any product that is being used for this needs to meet. It is not the only thing to consider. So we've also put targets on trying to address things like smoke and the types of fires that we see within a dwelling. So this is something that we've been doing as a company. So when you put this change in the fire problem against the backdrop of how traditional sprinklers have evolved from when the first practical patent for a traditional sprinkler was produced, that was in 1882 by a man called Thomas Grinnell, you can see why there is a need for more types of solutions to address these problems. Traditional sprinklers haven't changed fundamentally haven't changed a large amount. And I think that's in part due to the brilliance of the design and the standards framework that keeps them quite similar. But I think it also illustrates why it's so important that we have new types of technology. And I think Watermist is a huge part of that. Okay, so I won't go over this particular slide because Bettina already talked a little bit about this, but Watermist is really, really powerful because of its range of applications, whether it is a class A, B, C, E, or F fire, it can be effective in suppressing and extinguishing those different types. Now, one of the other points that I'd like to highlight about the technology was told to us over 10 years ago by the former head of the International Watermist Association, Ragnar Vigus. It's something that stayed with us in Plumis. He said to us, well, look, if you're going to be using Watermist, why not try and utilize the natural turbulence that the fire creates? So just to explain this, in this chart here, you can see that a fire draws in oxygen across the floor, it pushes out heat through its trunk, and then that spreads out across the ceiling. Traditional sprinklers, they use large droplets, which go against this updraft. You have to have large droplets in order to break the up force that the traditional sprinkler creates. The challenge with applying Watermist from the ceiling is that you have to use a bit more water because you have to cool the hot layer on the ceiling before you address the fire itself. So one of the things that we're doing at Plumis, and some other companies are, the manufacturers around the world, is mounting their nozzles lower because it is a bit more efficient way of addressing the fire, because your small droplets get entrained into the seat of the fire, so you can address it more quickly. The other thing that we have also been looking at is activation, and how can we trigger our systems if we're going to mount them lower. And for us, this is meant using infrared technology to identify the location. In the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can see what's visible in a fire, and just below, you can see what it looks like to an infrared sensor or camera. So our system involves looking at how the temperatures change within the room and using a methodology that a number of rate of rise detectors use, looking for change over time. So this is applied with our head, our unique nozzle head that you can see on the left side of the screen. And I'm just going to show you a video where we've done a comparison of our technology. You'll see it circled on the left side of the screen in a second, versus a ceiling mounted traditional sprinkler system. So the first thing that you'll notice is the system activates earlier. It does that because we're using our infrared technology to detect the fire. And we've included two charts on either one of the videos that display the amount of water which is used throughout the duration of the test. And this is something that is true of all Watermist systems and has a number of benefits for minimizing the consequential water damage within the space. So you can see it there in the room in the right. It takes about 2 minutes later before the traditional sprinkler activates, and we're using significantly more water to extinguish the fire. Okay, so I'm just going to go on and talk a little bit about our specific case study. So as I said, we've been working with a number of councils to try and improve factors. Here is an example of a layout with the system installed. This was retrofit into a small flat housing vulnerable people. Our heads are mounted in the kitchen, the living room, and the bedroom. You can see what it looks like, and this layout was chosen to minimize the disruption to the occupant. The heads are wall mounted within the rooms, either in plasterboard on the left or trunking on the right, and the individual pump sets are discreetly put within a cupboard there. Our approach is a little bit different, and it solves some problems that are associated with the traditional approach. The first one we look to address is the smoke. When a fire grows without a space, it changes temperature over time. You're building up smoke throughout the duration of the test. And what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody can escape within the available time. At one point, the tenability limit will be breached, and the purpose of how a traditional sprinkler would work is, while there's a buildup of smoke, we're looking to address the fire before that tenability limit is breached. One of the ways we act differently is we try to act at the earliest possible time. We do that by raising the alarm, with detection being a fundamental part of our system, and then as you can see from the previous test, operating earlier. So one final thing that I would just like to mention is that a key part of ensuring that the performance of the system is capturing all of the information around the key elements of the components of the commissioning. That involves testing the individual heads within the space to ensure that the sensors work, and running water through the heads and monitoring the pressure as part of the commissioning procedure, so that there is a record of validation. All of this information is stored digitally and handed over to the client, which again goes back to the enabling the customer to do their due diligence and meet the requirements of the regulatory reform fire safety order. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what we're doing, and explains this case study for Lambeth, which we are deploying as we speak.